Cricket has never finished at the close of play. It lives in the arguments, the memories, the comment sections. Cricket makes you talk. Combox is entering that chat. Welcome to Combox. Jarrod Kimber here on the Wagon Wheel Show, where we answer your questions on the world of cricket. The world of cricket? The year of cricket? The thing of cricket? You can get those questions into us if you're listening live or watching live on YouTube via the Super Chat function. But you can also support us on Patreon at Good Areas Podcasts. And there you can ask questions beforehand, like Ben has, who says, which current players do you think will be the next successful broadcasters? If possible, could you pick one close to retirement, one wild card who is at least 32 or younger? Pick one close to retirement. I don't think he's close. Well, actually, I don't know how old this person is. I've got a name, but let me just look how old he is, because I don't know. Yeah, I've got someone who's under 31. I don't think he's close to retirement, but I think Ben Duckett is really, really interesting. Someone in English Cricket told me that he should be on podcasts, and I hadn't heard him all that much outside of, press conferences and everything. And then I saw him on a podcast, and I think he did a bunch leading into the Ashes, and I was like, oh, okay, I get it. I actually had a sponsor come and ask me if I could do a podcast with a player, and it was Ben Duckett who I mentioned, and I tried to reach out, but it was a bit in the middle of the Ashes. He might have been a bit busy at the time, but I would say he would be there. I'm trying to think who else. I think Ish Sodhi would be interesting. I haven't heard him. Have I interviewed Ish Sodhi before? No, I don't think I have. I think Ish Sodhi would be really, really fascinating. Ish Sodhi has like a incredible memory when it comes to cricket, especially when it comes to stats and things, but just in general. So I think he has very, very good knowledge on the game. So I think Ish Sodhi might be the ideal guest for like Crick Picks, for instance, or a show like that. So those are two off the top of my head. I wonder about Angelo Matthews. Is someone else? Is he retired or not retired? I think he's not retired, right? So he was someone else. I would say I'm more thinking about podcasters, and I'll tell you why. It is very hard to tell if someone's going to be good at broadcasting until they do it. I think podcasting, you can get a bit more of an idea because podcasting is much more conversational. So you can get a bit of an idea when you're chatting to someone if they have the sort of conversational skills for podcasting. But as far as broadcasting, you kind of have to put them in. I think I've told the story before, but I always thought Dale Steyn would be a great broadcaster, a commentator, and he's fine. Like, he's not bad, but he hasn't lived up to my expectations. But on podcasts, Dale Steyn's incredible. And I think that's where I was getting the two things confused. Whereas Shane Watson, I was kind of going the other way. Whereas Shane Watson, I thought was a really good broadcaster. So it is a little bit different. I do think that cricket is probably looking for its next Navjot, Danny Morrison, Kerry O'Keefe, Bumble type of person. That's the one I'm more interested in, because those players usually come from sort of not like the sort of star players, but the players who are more interesting below. And so it's harder to pick those kinds of guys. But that's kind of where I always have my eye out. But I'm not sure I have a great name. But Ish Sodhi, Ben Duckett, Angelo Matthews, Jason Holder? Although, no, maybe not. Maybe not Jason Holder. Aravind says, it's fair to say that the WPL has become pretty popular fairly quickly. Do you think the initial number of 5 teams was too low and conservative and they could have started the league bigger? Yes. It was obviously too low. It didn't make any sense. And at some point in the not too distant future, would you imagine there would be an expansion? And what do you think is the optimum league size? Optimum, I'm not sure, but I think they should get to 8 teams pretty quickly. They did go, it's not a long enough tournament. They've made a couple of mistakes with it. Look, to be honest, I don't think they thought it was going to be this successful. I think I thought it was going to be this successful, but I don't think average people did. One thing that I think a lot of cricket boards around the world have misunderstood about women's cricket is the sponsorship changes things a lot. Brands that you usually wouldn't get sponsorship for are very interested, or even brands who usually sponsor men's cricket are quite happy to also be involved with women's cricket because it changes the audience a little bit, right? So I would probably I'd say that they started conservative, as I think most women's leagues did, outside of maybe the 100. And even then, that was forced a little bit by sponsorship and the BBC. So, yeah, I think it should be bigger. I think 8 teams is a perfect, you don't want to go from like 5 to 10 just because that's chaos as far as administration goes. And you have to make sure that you get these things right. But yeah, optimum size, I don't know. I don't know enough about, I'd have to have a look at the overall numbers. But I think there should be a lot more men's teams in the IPL as well. So I think that, and I think there's probably a problem with a couple of leagues around the world is that they haven't made the money they thought they were going to make. And so they're not looking to expand. And in some cases, you've just got, they're just slow moving leagues and they haven't worked out that actually the extra teams is probably what will make it work. Reese says, how much do you know about cricket's influence and the spread of football throughout the globe? AC Milan was a cricket club first, right? Yes. Obviously, the influence stopped somewhere. And was there a defining period where football-heavy countries now just stopped playing cricket? Cricket always had a bit of a weird relationship on the continent. It was, when England had more of a say in those places, that cricket was still being played, quite a lot. As cricket sort of pulls, as England pulls out of some of those countries, they disappear. So Argentina would be a perfect example, right? Of Argentina play rugby, they play football, and they don't play cricket. And I think a lot of that is to the way that cricket has obviously always been pushed as this gentleman nonsense sport. And it was probably kept a little bit more for the officers and everything else. Whereas I think if you look at Argentina with rugby and with football, maybe there was a little bit more regular folk were playing the game there. And I think that has probably been the case in places like Italy. And there's lots of places around the world that have very, very fancy cricket clubs, but don't have a great cricket industry around them. I'm thinking of someone like Hong Kong, right? But yeah, football is just easier to play with. Cricket's biggest issue outside of the Commonwealth and the gentlemen, and those are huge issues. But the third biggest issue is what happens in America, right? Which is when the Civil War is going on, getting facilities together to be able to play cricket is really, really hard. Getting facilities to play baseball is a lot easier. And so baseball sort of takes over from cricket at that point, despite the fact that it had always been the secondary sport, not just in England, but in America, but like in lots of places. I think there was like a little flare up of baseball in Germany, I want to say, and America had it, but cricket was really big. In fact, if you go back and read newspapers in the early mid 1800s, cricket is written about a lot more than baseball is, right? But once the Civil War sort of happens and that sort of starts to change quite quickly, I think that's a big problem with a lot of these places is that AC Milan would have had a beautiful green to play cricket on, but it doesn't develop in the same way that some of these other places do, where they start to, where they build their own stadium or their own grounds and start to develop from there. And I think that was a problem in Argentina. I think that's a problem in America. You then have the Commonwealth issue here, right? Which is you can't actually play cricket at the top level unless you're a Commonwealth nation. So a lot of countries that maybe play cricket and football are moving towards football makes more sense, right? You can play against the country next door, right? So I think all of these things play a part in the way that cricket moved. Cricket and football moves together and separately though as well. And I think it would be a fascinating, sort of historical look to go back and try and work out why cricket doesn't always find countries without the English being involved, but basketball and football do. Like, why does, like my grandmother played basketball in the 1920s in Australia. How does that happen, right? Whereas cricket doesn't seem to have that kind of same impact. Now, is it just facilities, right? Or is there something else? Is it the size of the grounds in some of these places and everything else? But yeah, eventually there is a split. But cricket and football was certainly pushed. But I think that football, because it was played by everyone, and because cricket was seen as a little bit more exclusionary, I think in those new countries that was part of the issue. Neil says, have you heard anything interesting about the 2007, 27 to 31 FTP? No, the ICC and big three test nations are already there, but wondering how they might be thinking about the calendar might be changing. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot going on with the ICC at the moment, Neil. I haven't heard anything about it really. I thought the last FTP would be the first one we would see where it was really pared back. But there's still enough money to be made from international cricket. So I'm assuming that is not going to be happening anytime soon. Obviously, with what's going on in the World Cup at the moment and the politics and everything, there might be some really, really big changes in the not too distant future. Ellie says, if you're running the PCB, how would you handle India not touring in the future for even world events? It's running the ICC. This is probably controversial, but when New Zealand and England pulled out of their tours a few years ago, I was like, what's Pakistan's future in international cricket anyway? Like, I would almost make sure that the PSL is massive. There's some sort of other thing that goes along with the PSL. Like, maybe even expand the PSL to like a longer tournament than the IPL and be like, have the first 3 or 4 month long tournament. Make as much money out of that as you can. Have some sort of other tournament that works. I don't know, maybe funding first class cricket and bringing over overseas players to come in playing first class cricket. I don't even know if that's but I would be coming up with something like that and making money and hopefully improving the economy and all that. You're hoping that some of those things get better around Pakistan and then going from there. I don't see anything changing with India and Pakistan while the BJP are involved, right? And they don't seem to be going anywhere. I haven't been following polling numbers or anything, but while that's the case, that's already an issue. And also the other issue that Pakistan has is they don't have enough expats around the world to make a huge financial change. I'd say England probably make a little bit more when Pakistan tour. But I remember talking to the ECB years ago, and they said that it works quite well for T20s and one days, but they don't make as much in Test cricket. And of course, Test cricket is where you really want to make the money. I grew up with a couple of Pakistanis in Australia, but I wouldn't say there's a huge Pakistani population in Australia. I'm sure there's healthy. Lots of the subcontinental countries have lots of people there, but I'm not sure it's huge. So I don't know if you're changing anything financially. So yeah, I would probably look to fix everything, domestically and make things better. But it's a big call to make that. Crete says, while it is understandable that there is a big difference between number 3 position and number 4, is it same for number 4 and number 5? By the time number 4 batter comes in around the 20th over, most opening bowlers will be done with their spells, and first and second change bowlers are bowling. We are seeing it now in a tough bowling era that number 5s are contributing more than number 4s. Is that a slight on them that they are doing it at number 5 and number 4? Okay, so the biggest difference, I remember having this conversation with an English cricketer once. He was like, I don't know why you talk about batting numbers. They don't matter. And I said, 12 overs. And he's like, what do you mean? And I said, 12 overs is like the average time between a wicket for top order players or whatever it was at that stage. It might have been 10 overs. It was probably before the pace playing pandemic, so maybe it was 12 overs back then. I said 12 overs is quite a lot of difference for a cricket ball, right? If you face a ball in the 8th over and you face it in the 20th over, it's very different. So there is still a big difference between the number 3 and the number 4 position. I don't think there's as much between. There is a very big difference between number 3 and number 4, I should say. There isn't as big a change between number 4 and number 5, but I still think it's quite significant. I think if you're coming in, around the 30th over, 31st over, it's very, on average, that is very different than coming in on the 20th over, where the ball is still hard and is still doing a little bit. And then when you're batting at number 4, you're more likely to come in the first 10 overs, right? Whereas a number 5 is pretty unlikely to be coming in the first 10 overs. So number 4, you still have to have some new ball skills available to you. At number 5, you probably don't. Number 5 is a much easier batting position. We talk about it all the way through the art of batting, right? Which is that it is it's probably the easiest batting position of the specialist batting positions, because I don't think number 6 is quite a fully specialist batting position. So generally, it's easier to bat at number 5. What's changed of recent times is that the new ball is now so dominant that it makes more sense to hide your most talented or your wrecking ball batter at number 5 and put them in, and put everyone else in a position crates where they actually have to, make a lot of runs. Put everyone else in a position where you know that you might get slightly fewer runs off your number 4, but there might be a payback with your number 5. It's interesting. Number 5s are now outscoring number 4s. Is it a slight that they're doing it at number 5 and not number 4? No, because I do think players like Travis Head, Harry Brook, Rishabh Pant, Daryl Mitchell are probably traditionally if you look at their skill sets, it probably makes more sense for them to bat at number 5, right? The difference is that I think in different eras, some of them would have, actually, that's probably not true, but maybe in Mitchell and Head's case, you would have pushed them up. But there's nothing wrong with someone being, skillful at number 5. Like Clive Lloyd is a perfect example of his skills probably didn't suit coming in early up in the order. And so at number 5, he was incredible, right? Steve Waugh and Shivnarine Chandrapal are 2 guys who probably at times should have moved for their team more, right? But if you look at their actual batting skills, maybe they're right to say they batted at number 5. But what other batters in the order might have said and have said at times is, why is the best bat at number 5, which is an easier position, rather than coming up, right? And in Clive Lloyd's case, that doesn't matter because they're such a strong side. I think if you look at some of the other players around the world, maybe sometimes you could argue that they should go up. But is it worth more to bat a player at number 5 and have them average 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 runs more, and have another player bat at number 4 and average 2 or 3 less? Like, those are the questions that are really hard to answer anytime you're making these sorts of conversations. Person says, why is Sri Lanka playing 3 ODIs right before hosting a World Cup and not like just 5 ODIs? So it's about the way that this is what cricket is completely broken. This question just proves that cricket is completely broken. But basically, England owed Sri Lanka ODIs, and this was the only time that it was actually going to fit. So Sri Lanka had to put them in this section. So the entire model is broken. It doesn't make any sense at all. There should have been, I don't know why England and Sri Lanka couldn't just, but like the cricket sides of these boards just come together and be like, can we not just play 6 T20s? That would have been a much better thing. But yeah, we shouldn't be playing ODIs right before a T20 World Cup and vice versa. But we do, and we will. Naveen says, is India so dominant in T20s that the main conversation has shifted from can they win to who makes the team? And does Dubé's ability to bowl these 1-2 overs give them the flexibility they need? Or is he actually a surplus to requirements? I think just with Dubé, just the ability to mash a ball from a spinner and make it. What a player like Dubé does is it makes you change your plans in the middle order. He has a gravitational pull that even some other players who might be more consistent than him and higher quality than him won't always have. It's like having a great 3-point shooter in basketball and putting them in the corner and knowing that that defender can't leave them. So it's actually going to change the way that team does defense, right? And I think that's what you're looking at with a player like Naveen, like Dubé. But yeah, when Australia got really dominant, that's what happened, right? The conversation goes on from can anyone beat them to surely this guy shouldn't be in the side. And you're like, well, actually, there's about 16 guys who could be in the side. And maybe that's not the thing you should be focusing on. But it happened with Australia. Probably happened to a lesser extent, but a little bit with the West Indies as well. Adityan says, do you know bowlers with a really irritating non-bowling hand? Do batters pick the line of the ball from the non-bowling hand? And if so, do you know bowlers who really changed where they were? There's some bowlers, and I can't think of anyone's name. No, is it Tim Murtagh? Used to run in with his arms really close to his side. And I always thought that was really annoying. There are some bowlers, I want to say, some of them do, it might be Stuart Broad and Sean Pollock, I'm just picking random names out of my memory, who sort of angle their wrists to the side. So they're actually, even though their arm is pointing where they want to bowl it, the hand is pointing to like cover or point, which I always felt a bit weird. But I can't think of anyone who's like put off players because of that. But players players don't even always know what puts them off, if that makes sense. But I'm sure that there are little ticks like that would bother different batters at different times. MF Jim says, one of the best rule adjustments this big bash has been fielding penalties. One player in once your innings timer is up, and full power play restrictions after 5 minutes of this. How could this be adapted to Test cricket to help poor over rates? Yeah. They basically changed the rules for poor over rates in Test cricket to help the better teams, didn't they? That if you bowled out a team within 80 overs, it didn't matter how slow you are. So now we get this weird situation, right, when a team suddenly realizes they're not going to bowl out their overs, and they suddenly change what they're doing. Okay, if you want to be extreme, the best way of doing it is to take a fielder off the ground, right? So you are this many minutes behind, and when you get back to being in front again, or being par or whatever it may be, you get to have your full fielders. There's plenty of, I'm not being silly, there are plenty of ways that we could fix this, right? Shot clocks between balls. We're already getting to the point where we've got a shot clock between overs. We can fix this if we want to. I don't think the major teams want to fix it, and they're the ones with the most political clout in ICC. PJ says, PJ, you mentioned that you haven't toured as a journo for 5 or 6 years now. I haven't toured overseas. I've done English. I've done tours within England, so I have covered games from within the ground. I can't remember the last time I went overseas to cover something. Although now I just can't remember, and maybe I have. If you did go somewhere to cover a series or tournament, how different would it be to trying to get accreditation? Now the good areas, Combox has 150k sub. Okay. I don't want to throw anyone else out there, but there's another major YouTuber who actually said to me that we should form some sort of an alliance to try and help other YouTubers and podcasters coming through, because Combox having 150,000 subscribers does not actually get me into any cricket grounds as an accredited media person. My Substack, which has quite a few less subscribers, although he's quite a healthy Substack, especially now, is how I would get accredited, because there is no system in any international country that I'm aware of where podcasters and podcasters and YouTubers can get accreditation. You can get accreditation sometimes via mainstream media outlets hiring you, or if you know someone, but even then it can be quite tough. I had a situation, I won't say who it was, where I had applied for accreditation for something that I was supposed to be going to, which fell through. And then I got oh no, actually I did cover this event. And then I got contacted by someone who worked at that for that cricket board, who said, can you change your application to stop mentioning your videos and to start mentioning your articles? And I was like, but my videos get like 10 times the amount. And they went, we know, but that's not how the process works. So no, are cricketers more open to giving creators access than they were before? No. I see there's what you get is with a lot of franchise cricket's a little bit more open to it, from what I can see. But basically what cricket boards do, and it's so fascinating to me, and you kind of put it in the rest of your question here, a lot of Aussie content creators doing official interviews and whatnot with the Aussie cricket team. And that also, there's a little bit of that with the English team. And I've seen that in some other places as well. And that's what is incredible. They will use podcasters and YouTubers, especially the ones who are known only for that. It's a bit different for me, right? Because I am also a writer and have been accredited for all these tournaments as a writer. But it's ridiculous that they will let these people hang out with their players, but they won't let them into the press box. It's so far behind. It's so stupid. But I mean, you still got, I think the BCCI used to have a rule about like online journalists as well, which as far as I was aware until very recently was still going on. I haven't checked it of recent times. Yeah, it's ridiculous and has been going on for a very long time. Ajit says, there are some striking parallels between Sri Lanka 03 to 15 and New Zealand 2011 to present in how their cricket evolved, competed, and was perceived globally. They're both overachievers with limited resources, each with their own golden generation, and they were incredibly consistent in ICC tournaments. Obviously, Sri Lanka had a steep decline since and has never been the same. Do you think New Zealand will also kind of fade away from global relevance? Or do you think their borders run well enough so they will continue to be consistent and competitive? I think Sri Lanka's been a little bit unlucky in some ways. But I think it's worth remembering that Sri Lanka is still a developing cricket nation, as in they had only been in international cricket for 20 years when they had that incredible run, right? And they don't have the depth of international cricket of, say, New Zealand. I think the biggest change that New Zealand cricket ever made was paying their cricketers domestically and then basically running their cricket as an academy, or their domestic cricket and their second 11 as an academy for the main team. They pick players with talent. They back them for a long period of time. Even when guys like Martin Guptill and Jeet Raval were not making it, they back their players. Matt Henry didn't take any wickets forever in Test cricket. They back their players. They fix issues. They look after people in a way that even bigger cricket nations are not nearly as good at. I think that kind of system helps, but eventually you just have a period where, you may not produce as many good cricketers. So they could have a decline, but I think they've got a pretty good system in place. That system may not continue because, people change. Hurt says, Glenn and Daz are clearly the engine room for the Black Caps batting right now. They're both playing hard and smart. If you're advising a team, what would it look like to keep those two quiet? I don't have anything specific on, I don't have analysis like that kind of a question. I would have to go off and check all the numbers. I think Daryl Mitchell against spin is a really tough proposition, and we talked about that in the Kuldeep episode. In that you can't really bowl short to, you can't really bowl full to him because one step and he can kind of get to it, and he's quite quick on his feet. He's also willing to sweep and reverse sweep you, so you can't set a proper field, and you can't bowl that shorter length to him because he's so strong he can probably cut and pull away as well. I think probably your best bet against those two is not bowling spin, which doesn't really work for you in the subcontinent. But I'd have to go through. I'm sure there is something that I would find. My memory of it was that they were bowling wider to Mitchell and wider to Phillips and straighter to Mitchell. And I did wonder at one stage if it was actually worth switching that around. But that's without numbers. That was just having a bit of a look. Abe says, you often hear it said, this team has the momentum coming into this game. From your perspective as a cricket analyst, does momentum track anything real? Something like the hot hand phenomenon, I can't say it, in basketball, except for a team. Abe, so I am well known within cricket for not believing in momentum. It is completely a made-up construct. If you want to really break it down, and I think me and Robbie might have done an episode on this on Kimapa, it basically means confidence, right? And I'm more than happy using the word confidence. Confidence makes sense to me. Momentum doesn't mean anything. We see test matches where there's like different teams are on top from session to session, day to day, and then they win the test match, and then they go into the next test match with momentum. No, they go into the next test match having won a test match. So they should be more likely to win the next one because they have shown they can beat their opposition. That's what we should be saying. And we somehow confuse it with this ridiculous phrase, which is such a pain in the ass. Yeah, you can win a game where you don't even... there was a basketball game recently. It was Nuggets versus Milwaukee Bucks, I think. And the Nuggets had this terrible side out in the court, and Milwaukee are falling apart. And the Nuggets were up by like 20 points, right? And then just didn't score again. And Milwaukee ended up losing by 2 off the, right at the end. Milwaukee had all the momentum in that game. I don't think that makes them more likely to win the next game. Denver won that game. I don't think that makes them that much more likely to win the next game. There are some times when you have the wood on a team because you have the matchups or you're better in those conditions or, whatever it may be. Again, that's not really a momentum thing, right? If momentum really worked in sport, I don't think we'd watch sport. It'd be really boring. Once a team got on top, they'd just be on top forever. Hayden says, what do you think is the ideal fielding position for a captain? A lot field in the slips, but this is mostly due to hierarchy and seniority. I feel like mid-on, mid-off is an ideal position as it would give you a better view of the field and allow you easier communication with bowler and umpire. Look, I always fielded at slip when I captained, and I always felt that was the best position to be in. I'm not a huge talker to bowlers because bowlers know what they're doing and know what they're trying to do. So I kind of feel like you should back bowlers. If you have a young bowler who doesn't know, or a bowler who doesn't know what they're doing, I think that's probably when you might want to move out of slip. But outside of that, you should back your bowlers to know what they're doing, I think, more often than not. I think slip gives you a better view than mid-on and mid-off. And also you get the instant feedback from the wicket keeper. So I think those are probably the positions that I think are best. And I think maybe in a perfect situation, Hayden, you would move between the both of them. Whereas generally we don't see that. And maybe that's a bigger issue. Ali says, during the Champions Trophy, ICC board didn't take a vote on what to do with India pulling out of visiting the host country. How come there is a difference in the ICC procedure now with Bangladesh doing the exact same thing? Okay, there is a huge difference between these two things. And I don't know how much this has been explained. But the biggest difference is that from the moment that Pakistan got the event, the ICC started planning for the fact that India probably wouldn't go to Pakistan. So for a long period of time, there had been a conversation if you go back to the podcast that me and Bayram used to do, we were saying it like every week. When is this going to be announced? Why is this being dropped? Because we just knew it was coming. Neither of us ever thought India was going to play cricket in Pakistan, right? And then it happened. And so by that stage, the ICC had a backup plan. Every board would have already assumed the same that we had assumed. And it was like, okay, this is not ideal, but this is what we're doing. This is way different, right? The first issue that we have here is that the auction was on the 16th of December. The comments from the former BJP politician, is it Som? I think it's Som. Are on the 2nd of January, I want to say. I know there was a little bit of Telegram or WhatsApp before then, but the real the major part sort of comes on the 2nd. So the 2nd of January, and it's then like the 6th or the 7th of January when the real threat of Bangladesh pulling out of the tournament happens. That's a month before the tournament. There was no backup plan. No one ever assumed that Bangladesh wasn't going to be able to play in India. And so that's the first major difference. So before they had a secondary plan, I believe there was talks. I don't think there was a vote, as you said. I think you're right in that. But there was certainly talks, and everyone was kind of just waiting for the shoe to drop, and no one expected them to play. This came very, very suddenly. And let's be honest, there's pissing competitions happening everywhere, right? There's a pissing competition happening between, you obviously former BJP and then BJP politicians. I'm pretty sure there have been sitting politicians who've been talking about this as well, over something that has been going on for a very long time. Like there are a lot of people who are very upset with the way the Hindus are being treated in Bangladesh. And you can go on, I think there's a website called Minority Rights, which has a history of it, right? Which suggests it's been going on for a long time. Mustafizur Rahman has been playing in the IPL for an awful long time, right? With many different owners. This would have been his 6th different team, right? It's obviously flared up again. And so there are some people very upset at that. Then you've got the Bangladesh side of this, which I don't think the ICC or the boards actually truly understood that what was going on with the Bangladesh government when it first started, and that they were this serious. I think they just thought it was a thing that was being said. So I think there was a bit of a stall. I think there's a gap, I could be wrong, between like the 4th or 5th and the 17th when not much happens. Realistically, looking at where we are now, a lot more should have been happening, right? Delegations should have been involved. People should have been flying around. And instead, Bangladesh are like, we're probably not coming. And the ICC is like, well, you have to make a decision eventually, right? And so that has happened. And I just think that's probably the period of which the adults should have actually talked to each other and seen if they could come up with a compromise. But this isn't adults. This is politicians from 2 different countries, maybe even 3rd if Pakistan get involved, right? Getting involved with things to do with cricket and then cricket not being ready to react to it. So it's a very different situation to the India one, right? Where it's more interesting, of course, is when Bangladesh said we're not willing to play in India, the first comment from the ICC was, then you forfeit your points, right? As far as I am aware, that was never mentioned to India within a serious meeting or discussion. That's fascinating to me, right? That's where the double side of this comes in. And I think that's a really honest, anyone looking at that, you can have political beliefs in any side that you want. But that is the point where you go, well, wait a minute, right? But the fact that a month out from the tournament, that Bangladesh were making this, as I said, there was no contingency, there was no expectation. How could anyone have even thought about this? Even on the 16th of December, this wasn't an issue, right? When Mustafiza gets the big pay, when 3 different teams wanted him, only one have been called potential traders, I believe, but 3 different teams wanted him. That's why he went for so much money. There was no issue. It took a couple of weeks for that to bubble up from what, as I said, probably from social media, because that's where most of these things come from. And then it becomes a big issue. And then within 3-4 days of that, it explodes. But then there's this long pause in the middle. And I think that's when they tried to bring it back by having a proper meeting. I would be shocked if there weren't meetings without votes previous. But clearly it is a very different situation than the India one. That doesn't mean, though, we have had Australia, West Indies, New Zealand, and England forfeit games in World Cups before, right? There are lots of precedences that have been changed here, right? And it's not just about the politics. It's also about the fact that the other ICC boards wanted Bangladesh to make a decision, so they still had time to bring another team over, so they could play the games, so that the TV rights deal wouldn't be affected. It's not just politics, right? It's also about literally them wanting that. So it goes in so many different directions, this. But that's why it is different than the previous one. But at the same time, so when you say the exact same thing, it is not the exact same thing, right? But at the same time, obviously, the ICC have made a huge error here. And I think maybe the worst thing that the ICC did was they said that the Bangladesh team was not under any threat. There is a direct threat made by Som, the former BJP politician, to Mustafiza Rahmat, right? He says if he comes here, he won't get out of the airport. I've read that as a threat. And looking at his history as a person, I think it's fair to say that at the very least they were going to, you could understand why Mustafiza would have seen that as a threat. Well, Mustafiza is still supposed to be playing in India at the moment, right? So the ICC have now said that is not a serious threat. Again, that doesn't really hold up. So there's lots of things here who don't hold up, but it is not exactly the same as what happened with the Sri Lanka games, what happened with Kenya, what happened with Zimbabwe, and what happened with India and Pakistan, India in the Champions Trophy. It is different to all of those, but it's also a completely different precedent is being set again, which is why people are quite rightfully angry. And you've also got just politicians from all different countries who don't give a shit about cricket, right? None of them give a shit about it. I'm not even sure they give a shit about the things that they say out loud, but they certainly don't give a shit about cricket. Prudvi says, this is primarily regarding highlights. I feel like almost all the sports around the world understand that giving highlights for free is the best marketing for their sport team club. They do not. They do not, Prudvi. It's very... I did a video ages ago where I showed a clip of Giannis Antetokounmpo playing for Greece. Actually, no, it wasn't him. It was Baby Shaq playing for Greece. And we were told we couldn't use it. There's lots of sports around the world that do not let you use any footage at all and do not let you put it on YouTube at all. Why do cricket? The BCCI refused to upload the highlights on YouTube. I would say that's a sponsorship thing. I know that there was... I don't know about the BCCI directly, but I know with the ICC, they had a sponsorship deal with Facebook. So they were putting all the highlights on Facebook. Okay. Is it the broadcasters or the boards? Because no one is watching highlights or reruns these days. I would simply pirate them because of how difficult they are to access. Yeah, the boards are not strong enough in basically doing what the NBA has done, right? So the NBA, which is probably the best example of how to do this, but it is very rare what the NBA have done. If they've just gone, put as much, people can put stuff up online. They can't put anything up live, which is absolutely fair. And you can't monetize it, which again, I think is very, very fair. But you should be allowed to put things up online to say, look, my favorite basketballer has done this. The rest of the sports are just so far behind on this, Prithvi, and they don't. This is the thing. If they did their job correctly, it's not just about YouTube. I don't care about that. But like, I went to the BCCI site recently to try and look at some videos. They have so few videos on there, right? And that's the frustrating thing. If these boards actually put clips up correctly or allowed you to do stuff, and even allowed us to pay for, you know, the ball by ball stuff that, you know, again, you can get via other sports, it would be much better. But at the moment, we're in this terrible situation where most of the cricket boards in the world are just bad at this. Mob says, besides wicketkeeper and the greatest slip cord, which regulation fielding position statistically claims the most catches? And is this a position that has changed over time? I don't know if I have a great answer for that. That might be one for CricViz. At least they would have data from the last decade. Who have you said there? Mid-wicket. Yeah, I would have thought it's cover or mid-wicket. Feels like a place where you get lots of catches. Probably more likely to be mid-wicket, as you say. Although not all teams have mid-wickets in. And usually have covers after about the 20th over, don't you? I would assume it's one of those two positions, though. It would have been short leg, traditionally, would have been the other one. And there would have been a time when leg slip was quite high up on that as well. But I would assume that the way that modern players play, it would be mid-wicket. And when I say modern players, like that last 30 years. Crate says, do you think the ICC might ban Pakistan and Bangladesh from international cricket? No. I think it's more likely that what has happened now will lead to a schism. I don't think it will be we ban them. I think what is more likely in the future is that there is some sort of schism between Pakistan and Bangladesh, between different nations, and that the ICC might be in a situation where I don't think the ICC can ban Bangladesh for what they've done. The Bangladesh government have obviously balls this up, and not everyone in Bangladesh cricket agrees with what's happened, right? But I think they have a pretty solid argument, right? If it was not safe for Mustafizur Rahman to tour in March, April, May, whenever the IPL is going to be on, and they're taking over him and a whole team, I think they have a pretty good argument. And now, what the ICC can say, and as I mentioned in the previous answer, is it's just too late, right? Which is also fine. And so, okay, well, we're not going to play in this one then, and you found someone else, and that's fine. That's how the adults should deal with it. And then there should be proper meetings where everyone comes together and tries to work out what happens when this happens in the future, and whether there should always be a contingency plan or whatever that may be. That's not how cricket is run. But I wonder if we're in a situation now where franchise cricket is taking over. Traditionally, it made financial sense for all these teams to play each other. It really no longer makes sense for India specifically to be involved in the World Cup, right? There's political reasons why it makes sense. There are nationalism reasons why it makes sense. And there are cricket reasons why it makes sense. But financially, it's not quite the same. So are we in a situation where there is another league? Are we in a situation where the ICC sort of falls apart? Remember, we were doing videos not that long ago about how there's been plenty of Indian people publicly who've said the ICC is not fit for purpose and shouldn't exist anymore. Causing an issue like this, and I'm not saying that's what the random politician did it for, but I'm saying an issue like this probably gets us closer to the ICC not being together, right? The issue that cricket has is there's too many countries with an intersectional history who have issues with each other, and not enough countries outside of that, right? That's essentially what this comes down to. Ian says, when you get pictures like those for the ODIs in Sri Lanka, is it fair to say that that how well your third and fourth spinners bowl is more important than your bankers in some way? Yeah, I think so. On those sorts of wickets, I think at that point you realize that You have to be flexible with your frontline bowlers. I thought in the first game when Jamie Overton started hitting the ball everywhere that like Sri Lanka made a mistake in just not bringing back a part-time spinner on, because it would have been much harder for him to do that same damage off a part-time spinner than it was off the frontline seamers. So yeah, I think when you get a wicket like that, and you have to be adaptable and understand that sometimes that's what it is. And I thought England's second, third, and fourth best spinners bowled really well in the second game, and in the first game, Sri Lanka's first four spinners bowled really well. So, you can't expect Dhananjaya De Silva and Asalanka to be stars every single time and get you out of that kind of trouble. Abe says, what explains Labuschagne's dipping trajectory since his early purple patch, especially his not converting starts? Did he get found out somehow? Yeah, he came into an era when everyone was bowling a very particular ball on loop to him. And then shortly after that, everyone started changing the way that they were bowling, right? Because they realized that bowling that ball to him didn't actually work. And so they changed. That's a very normal thing. That happens a lot. The difference is now it's a bit more stark. I also think people are a bit more patient with Labuschagne now. He does hit the ball in the air quite a bit. And I think they just wait for him. Sam says, I'm in the UK 28 and plotting a career change. My strengths include explaining complicated topics verbally and textually, and recognizing when people are talking from unshared assumptions. How would you suggest getting into broadcast journalism? Is my course back online yet? My course is not online yet. I'll just explain it. So I have a course called Fans with Laptops, and I will be emailing everyone soon. It's been so busy, I haven't had a chance. And I had a problem with the company that I was doing this with, and it didn't work. And then I went and rewrote the course. So the course has been rewritten and it's been updated, but it hasn't been re-recorded yet, so we haven't uploaded it. But we will be contacting everyone very soon and just explaining what's happening. I don't really know how to get into broadcast journalism because I did it as a writer, and that probably doesn't exist anymore. I'm not sure writing exists anymore. So yeah, the world has changed. Let me just message this person. Someone keeps calling me, and I realize why they're calling me, and I can't help them at the moment. But yeah, so that I don't know. But, I mean, realistically, study the people who are very good at it, work out what is not being done and do it, and get better every day. Look at what you can do to be better. But there is something in my course, but yeah, it will be back up. It does have a bit more broadcasting stuff and everything involved in it at the moment. Ben says, does Steve Smith have the best pure hand-eye coordination we've ever seen, given his unique technique and being one of the best slippers I've seen? I don't know. How do you compare Steve Smith's hand-eye coordination with Abhishek Sharma's or Glenn Maxwell's? I'm not sure I have a great answer for that. I think I was talking about this on podcast recently. I don't even know how you actually adequately look at hand-eye coordination. It's a thing that we say a lot, but I don't know. Aravind says, is the increased bowling-friendly pitches as well as the changed Kookaburra ball in Australia the reason why there is a dearth of batting talent in the domestic game? Do you think there's a sense amongst those running the game that at least domestically... do you think there is a sense amongst those running the game that at least domestically they need to have a flatter pitches to make sure that they continue to produce test quality batters? Yeah, look, it's been mentioned for a while. It's not just obviously the bowling friendly pitches. Shield cricket never used to be played for points. Like, I know it was played for points, but teams weren't. I mean, there was always that thing of going up to Queensland early year and getting green wickets and everything, but teams weren't really. It's not really the Australian way to make your pitches all that different. And that was certainly started to happen about a decade and a half ago. The ball and the wobble, the ball being reinforced and the wobble ball coming along at the same time has also probably exacerbated all of these issues, right? I don't think it means you can't have great batters come out of those situations. I think it's hard to have confident batters. And so it maybe doesn't stop them having their next Steve Smith. It probably stops them having their next Shaun Marsh, Marcus North, Players who can come in and do a job for a little while. Simon Kadich, right? Who are good and better than good in some cases, but you're never going to be long-term test players. I think that there's certainly an element of that that causes a problem. I think in general, the flatter your pitches are domestically, the more your batters do well internationally. But it's also a situation now where the test pitches aren't flat anymore. So if you had really flat domestic pitches, you'd be throwing people in with no preparation. So I'm not sure that my theory has always been that first class pitches are usually spicier than test wickets. So if you can make your wickets flatter, when you get to test cricket, you're ready for flat pitch batting, and that's what you need to be good at. That just doesn't seem to be the world that we live in right now. Ari says, with the landscape of cricket changing constantly, is there a way you define players' legacy changing? I mean, more from a mathematical point of view, or is the formula for defining peaks or comparing players across eras statistically going to stay linear? I think we're still just coming up with different ideas anyway, right? Like, I think as the game is changing, Reese, we are naturally thinking to ourselves, like the last 10 years or 15 years maybe, we've learned so many different ways of thinking about cricket from a statistical or analysis-based thing, right? Usage is not something that we always looked at. We didn't always go factor in the bowls were first change, right? Batting position, all these basic things that are coming in. So I think we'll continue to do that. Look at some of the things I did with the book, and we tried to do with the all format show the other day. Like, I think there's so many different variables that you have to keep bringing up and discussing all the way through, that I think it's very, very, I think it's just fair to do that, right? So yeah, I don't think there's like one right thing. We use match factor and era factor. We use true O's and sixes and all these different dots and sixes. Sorry, we use all these different formulas, but when we find something better, we'll use them, and that should be the case for anyone, right? The more information that we can get, the better that we can understand players and everything else. And that's what we strive to be here, right? And that's what anyone, I think, who wants to do analysis or stats. I always worry about the person who comes up with like the one, like I came up with true economy, and I really like true economy and true strike rate. But if I come up with something better, or someone else comes up with something better, I should use that, right? It's like the people who still use Basra to work out if a T20 player is good. Basra was flawed when we came up with it, and we all knew it didn't quite work. If you're still using it now, that means you probably like have an emotional attachment to it, and that's not the gig. Neil says, any current upcoming projects you're excited about, whether that's an interview, tour, feature, essay? I've got like a bunch of features actually I've been working on for a while. I've got one on part-time bowlers in Test cricket. I've got one on West Indies and basketball. There's something else I'm missing here too. There's a bunch. I can't even think of the others. There's like 4 or 5. A wobble ball. There's a huge wobble ball one. There's a huge one on the origin of cricket. So there's 4 that I've come up with. I don't think I have any interviews with anyone planned. I mean, a lot of it at the moment is about Combox and getting that started. So we're hoping to have a huge event for the World Cup, unlike anything that cricket's ever done before. So I'm hoping to be either in Sri Lanka or in India for the World Cup. But yeah, features and essays, I have those things that I came up with. I'm trying to think if there's anything else off the top of my head. A lot of it's been Combox dependent. Yeah, and then of course the Kohli book, right, which I'm working on at the moment. So I suppose all those things. MF Jim says, with Bangladesh playing 2 test matches in August, do you think this could become a new standard fixture for smaller teams? There are 4, potentially 5 grounds that can be used that time of year. They've tried it in Australia. It doesn't quite work because people don't really watch it on TV. And they don't get massive crowds. I think they want it to work, and they have for a long time. Like, when did Sri Lanka play there? Was it Matthew Elliott went up against Malinga, I want to say? Was that Mackay, Townsville, Darwin, Cairns? That was a long time ago. That was Matthew Elliott, right? It was late 90s, early 2000s. It's always been there. It hasn't quite worked. One of the weird things about Australia is that It took them a very long time to work out that a lot of the country can play cricket all year round. But yeah, I think they'll they've played Zimbabwe up there, up north before. I think they'll play some of the smaller countries there. PJ says, is there room for a modern T2011 for a Mike Brealey type specialist captain? Where would you hide a player like this? Maybe someone who bats 7 and bowls 1-2 overs max. Late career Darren Sammy with no knees is probably a version of this, right? But he'd earned it as a player by that point. I don't think there is a role for this because I don't rate captaincy as highly as many other people do. But if you're going to hide them, you field them at short fine leg. Remembering Brealey couldn't field. And yeah, bat at number 7 as like a specialist. Or maybe you bat them as like if they're a spin, but whatever their speciality is with the bat, you try and maximize that, even if it's just over an 8 to 12 ball period. And then obviously, yeah, you bowl them the 7th over and the 9th over. Ajit says, probably 2 years late in asking, but when Hardik Pandya was initially being booed and abused by their own fans, why didn't Mumbai India ask Rohit to make a public statement about his support? Especially once you see how Kohli public supported Faf and later Patidar helped them. It seems like such a simple misstep from everyone in Mumbai. I don't know. I don't know if Rohit was asked. I don't know if Rohit was upset, right? Because of what had happened to him. So I don't know the story well enough to tell you if something happened behind the scenes. There are some players who would do it and some who wouldn't. I'm not saying Rohit is either of those. I don't know if I have a good grip on him, but I know some players who wouldn't do that. And they'd be like, no, you demoted me and now you want me to come out and be the bigger person, but you didn't handle my demotion very well, right? It reminds me of what Michael Holding told me once, which is the players are kids and the administrators are parents. Mob says, in 2013, New Zealand built a covered pitch marquee in Lincoln so they could start creating funky dust bowls in southern New Zealand. It appears to have worked wonders in the past decade of subcontinent results. Can you please talk about if and how other teams are doing similar things, and whether they can plan ever to really replace the conditioning preparation of a warm-up tour match? Lots of places have done this. It's very common now for some places to actually have like Australian-style nets, English-style nets, Asian-style nets. It's a very common thing when you go around the world. Sometimes even with the dirt and everything else there. So yeah, it does happen a lot, but it doesn't help you with the net bowlers. It doesn't help you with the type of bowlers. It doesn't help you with the heat. It doesn't help you with how they react under that. So it works, but only up to a point. Sam says, when reading the title question of the last but one wagon wheel, which test team had the highest ceiling and rarely reached it? I immediately thought of England in the mid to late 2010s. Did Bazball just come too late? Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I've talked about this before, but they had I think they always had the one issue with Bazball, which was they had so many people who wanted to bat at number 6 or number 7 that they couldn't even fit them all on the team. And I think that was maybe the bigger issue they had even back then. If they had a more equal way of doing things, I think that would have been better. Let me just see if there's any super chats. There's 4. Oh, helps if I get rid of the question off the screen, doesn't it? Is it safe to say this version of Abhishek from the past 2 years is the best T20 batter of all time? I mean, no, he's not the best T20 batter of all time, but this might be the best peak we've seen, and obviously he can go on to be the best T20 batter of all time. But there's a long way to go before he gets that, isn't there? I think we're a step away from that. Sandcup says, which cricket experiment that fizzled out you enjoyed the most and should come back? Bowl outs were fun. I love bowl outs. They used to have nets instead of boundaries. They should do that again. Walnut says, do you think the way that sport is talked about impacts its cultural mainstreaming in new countries? I've always wondered if the constant baseball analogy and praising T20 held cricket back. I think the media has a big role to play in how sport grows, and it doesn't always understand that. SRT says, PAC has been officially made aware of potential serious sanctions, including suspension from global events and NOCs for PSL. Why is PCB doing this exactly? Politics. Do you think these people care about cricket? politics. I'll see you again next time for more Wagon. Combox. The game lives on.